good time?
Yeah.
Real good time?
Good time.
All visiting, though. It was your family and your friend that you knew from Houston, you haven't seen for 10 years.
Yeah, 10 years.
Yeah, so we spent very little time in the camper. The World's a Fun Campground, it was actually a pretty nice little campground.
Oh, yeah.
Easy in, easy out, right there on the loop, so,
I almost feel bad for them because they're just not very full at all.
That's the COVID. That's the COVID, so. But
they even blocked like every other campground. Every other slot was empty.
yeah, which, and they definitely could have kept a good 6 or 10 or 15-foot rule if they filled every spot. But they went ahead and just did not fill every spot. They filled a spot and skipped a spot, filled a spot and skipped a spot. And so,
World's of Fun didn't look that busy either.
No, it didn't. It didn't. I think this is really going to hurt.
Which is amusement park. I guess we should say that.
Did it amuse you?
I didn't go. I've been there.
You've never been to World's of Fun?
I don't know if I've been there or not.
God, I was there when I was like 15, I think, something like that. But I've only went there one time, so that was just the other day when I was 15. So, but one thing I wanted to talk about this morning is we went to tear the trailer down, and we're finding little things that are wrong and this and that. And the one major thing that happened this morning is the T valve, the T slide that's to our gray tank number 2, apparently jiggled its way off, because those things, they always tell me to always tighten them every time you move them and things like this, because down the road they'll jiggle and they'll unscrew it and you drop it, and guess what? You don't have a T-rod. So I got 3 total, because I had 3 valves. I got a black tank and 2 gray tanks. So I took the one off of the one tank and then took it to the front and then used it to empty the tank. But I tell you, these rods go back in a hole, and then you got to find the threaded rod on the other side. And then once I got that tank empty, I had to take it back and put it back where it belonged, and then to empty those tanks. And so, needless to say, it was a little bit of a pain.
What do you want me to say?
I got kind of sweaty. But you're going to find this when you camp. I mean,
So is it something that maybe you should have 2 of?
I think you should have a matter of fact, I called a camper dealer that was on the way out of town, and he said, "Oh yeah, I got one." And first thing in my mind was, I'm going to buy 2, so that way if it happens again, I just got to put one back on and not spend all the time back and forth, because that was what the pain in the rear end was.
So it's an inexpensive fix?
I think it is. I don't even know what they cost, but I mean, it was, what's almost an hour of your time on the ground where somebody had, put it that way, where the sewage drops, we should say it that way. But what I want to get to is, in trailers, there is going to be problems. And you can either just, oh my gosh, oh geez, what are we going to do? This is terrible, or you can just sit back and say, okay, there's problems. We just got to deal with them. We got to keep a positive attitude, because there was about 2 other ones that popped up. We found that we've got a little bit of leaking water, some of the traps in our seats, and it was just because they had loosened up a little bit. You realize when you go down the road, you got an earthquake going on behind you. And I had one of my shelves in my outside kitchen. It broke down because I had a case of water on top of it. It's my fault I put the case of water on top of it, but I ended up trying to fix it the other day and taking the screws out without as many tools as I typically have back home, and you can see the result of my endeavors. So, and the one thing more than anything, when you're doing something like this, don't rush, because it's going to put you behind schedule, behind Gary's schedule? And God, we don't want to get behind a Gary schedule, do we?
No, it's not good.
So it's not good to get behind a Gary schedule. No. But when you rush, you can just multiply the problems. They can get worse and worse and worse. So it's just, I mean, I specifically walked around the trailer twice before we left. Just because I said, what if you just miss something else? What if the stars aren't quite aligned for Scary Gary today, you know? So, but if we weren't out here having fun, because we had a good time in Kansas City, we wouldn't have, and these problems do not take away from the fun.
No.
Unless you let them. So,
these are minor problems.
they are high-class problems, as we say, right? Very high-class problems. So we're on our way to northeast Missouri, to see my little sister and mother, and spend a couple days up there, another campground. Today we're going to talk about our next stop, which is a small little campground up in northeast Missouri called Halsted's Hideaway. Now, I used to hunt for campgrounds on an app that was called RV Park Advisor. It hasn't been updated, so a lot of the information and a lot of the reviews are a couple years back. So then I started to try to use Allstays a little bit. I'm not too wild about Allstays because it seems like it gives me way too much information. There's some information I love. I mean, it's like it tells you low bridges and low areas and things like this, but there's just so much other things and I'm really just looking for the campgrounds, and that's what I'm looking for. I have the KOA app now, but that's only for the KOAs. And then here comes Campendium, and I thought it was, it was like up to date. I've heard it from other YouTubers, and so I've been kind of using it the last couple trips, just almost exclusively. But I'm telling you this, on all of those apps, there's no such thing as Halsted's Hideaway. And I was talking to the owner when I was at the campground, and he says, yeah, if you do campgrounds, you don't get it. If you do RV parks in that area of Missouri, there's some engines that get it, but it's like kind of laid way down the line. So he's very small. So we actually, when I set this trip up, the main reason for going up to northeast Missouri was to see my mom, Gigi, who you guys saw back in the San Antonio trip. So we wanted to go up there and visit her while we're on this trip. And Mary Lou, she kind of likes to have full hookups, and there was nothing I could find on Campendium in the area of, my mom lives in Edina, Missouri. My little sister, who lives very close, is in Bering, Missouri, which is 10 miles away. So they're really close to each other. And there was virtually nothing. I mean, you got Kirksville, which is about an hour away. You got Quincy, which is about an hour away the other direction. And I mean, and Hannibal's just a little bit to the south of it. And there was a few things up in Kirksville and a few things over in Quincy and Hannibal. But still, that's like an hour drive plus to get back over to do the visiting. And there was, everything else I found was just partial hookups and tents. And, that's all I saw. So luckily enough, my brother-in-law, he has one of his family members, they go up there and they camp at it from time to time. And they have picnics up there from time to time. It's a small campground. It has a lake. And matter of fact, they were putting some beach sand out there for a little swimming area, which is docked off and everything. It's like a Missouri swimming hole, which is virtually a lake that they did put some sand on it. But it's got, 12 places. They are 50 amp. It is in the middle of nowhere. Per se. It was about 7 to 10 miles away from my younger sister north of Bering, Missouri. But it was a nice little quiet spot. We got there, there was 2 campers there, but nobody in them. And there was nobody on site. So I had to call the number, and they told me, he says, yeah,
just pick a spot basically, and says, "No, I'll come by later. I'll get the money and everything like this." And I just took the #1 spot on the end because it's actually the best place to do a back end to. But again, it had 50 amp. I had terrible cell reception. We have AT&T, and I mean, it was barely 1 bar on the outside and hardly any on the inside. I had put a cell booster on the trailer before we left, and it helped just a little bit. And that's going to be a neat stuff that's coming up here in a week or two that I'm going to cover, is wow, that cell booster worked. But as campgrounds go, I mean, you're talking $25 a night, no cable. And I thought I had 0 TV reception there, but that's somewhat of a lie, because somewhere between Kansas City and Edina, or in Bering, Missouri, which was the actual address of Halsted's Hideaway, I lost the top of my TV antenna. The little bat wing part that sits on the top of it apparently unscrewed and blew off, So I'm thinking I have no TV reception up there, which I grew up a little bit to the south of this area, and we only had like 2 TV stations in Columbia, Missouri, and we had 1 TV station, which you had to have a separate antenna, which you barely got, up in Kirksville. So I was like, why do I get in Kirksville? And I thought, well, maybe we're down in a hole, maybe we're this, whatever, and things, and maybe the antenna's just not working that well. And which is a correct statement. When it's not on attached, it's not working that well. But we had a very good time. Didn't stay in the campground too much. I do need to talk about one thing that was the worst part of this trip, and that is getting there. We were on I would consider secondary roads. None of them gravel until we actually pulled to get it in the campground, and it was a pretty long little drive getting in the campground, because it's like we almost like driving through a soybean field or a cornfield on our way to the campground. But there was a sign on the outside of it that said Halsted Hideaway, and we drove into it, and there we are. But we were on our GPS was telling us, so take this way, it's 3 minutes quicker, take this way, whatever. So we were kind of taking a lot of back blacktop roads, and unfortunately one of them was being resurfaced. And I'm telling you, like, the vehicles, and they had us stopped and there were only like 1 lane traffic for a period of time. And so I'm following other vehicles, and I'm seeing what looks like mud flying up in the air, but it wasn't mud. It was cakes of gravel and tar that were, some of them were this big. There's actually still some underneath the trailer today. And it got all over the front of the trailer. And luckily enough, in Edina, Missouri, where my mom lives, there's a truck car wash right beside it. And my brother-in-law, he got some diesel and some cleaning solution and things. And we cleaned probably 90% off the front of the trailer before, and off the truck before we left. But I guess I'm not gonna have to worry about undercoating my truck. But we had a good time up there, and I hope you've enjoyed this review, and I hope to see you next week.
If you like the video, give it a thumbs up.
Turn on your post notifications.
Put the comments down below.
Subscribing will make me happy.